All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome down the Security Rabbit Hole to yet another edition of the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. This is Raf, and for I don't know, third or second or another year in a row, I'm just going to save myself the embarrassment of not having very good memory. We are going to be recording live-ish from Enfuse conference. From Open Text for the year 2020. And of course, everybody's gone virtual this year, and it is a hootin' good time, even though it's virtual. So I once again got the pleasure of getting the conference going, dropping some introductions and some new things that are happening. And I always like to get in on the technology and the big picture stuff. So here we go. All right, buckle in, kids, because it's going to be a good one. With me, I have Mr. Anthony Di Bello, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. Introduce himself. I introduce myself. He's going to introduce himself. Wow, what day is it?
And I'm with Rafael Los.
I love the fact that you've got your nice banner in the background. Here I am, just my office and my cabinet full of curios back there. But welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks, Raf, and that's it. I'm trying to bring the event foyer to the screen this year, and thanks for having me for the nth time on
another time
on the Security Rabbit Hole.
Awesome. Well, folks, if you're curious, because we've mentioned things on the screen here, if you'd like to watch us, this is getting published out to a new YouTube channel, and that I'm putting up for the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. I call it bonus content if you'd like, but sometimes we'll have fun with some video as for this one. And if you miss any of the video cues, you'll get to go watch them. All right. So anyway, Anthony, 2020, it's been a heck of a year, huh?
Hey, it sure has, and just like everybody else watching, it's definitely affected our business.
Wow. Well, I mean, we're talking virtually, so it could be. Look, it could be worse. We could not be here.
That's right.
But on a lighter note, so Enfuse 2020 at Open Text is how long has Open Text officially been part of the security world now? About 2 years?
Since 2017, September 2017.
God,
we're creeping on 3.
Wow. All right. Well, 3 years it is then. I've been following you guys along. It's a interesting play, and I guess the theme for this year, at least in my head, I'm just going to override your marketing people just right now because that's what I do. Convergence, right? The convergence between data, e-discovery, forensics, and some of the other types of things that you in the capabilities bucket that have traditionally been I'll say staffed by different departments or ultimately from different groups. Tell me a little bit about, first off, let's take this back a couple steps before I get too excited. Let's talk about what's new this year. What are you guys doing? Like, where's your head at?
Well, there's a lot new this year, and a lot of it is coming on the tails of that massive shift to work from home that's affecting most of our customers. If I were to go back, even 5 years when folks were talking about move to cloud and using and gaining the benefits of and moving our infrastructure, it didn't really happen 5 or 6 years ago. But with the global pandemic, it seems as if that was the thing that it took to make this shift a reality. We're hearing more and more from customers that we're now in a 1 to 2 year window to make this move, more than just a quarter of our stack, but really looking to offload the vast majority of IT infrastructure to the cloud. And as a result, we've had to rethink how folks can consume and deliver investigations, incident response, et cetera, when we're relying on home networks through VPN to connect to the corporate backbone. The vanishing perimeter that we've been talking about for years is gone, and it went away overnight.
Yeah, no kidding. Nothing forces evolution like the prospect of potentially losing your life if you choose to not evolve. I mean, it's kind of a grim assessment, but unfortunately, the reality we've had to contend with. And there's a lot of stuff that out there that says some of the companies that have shut down and sent employees home are going to come back, if not before the end of 2020, then sometime in early 2021 or maybe by middle. But there is plenty of, and continuing to add research to the fact that some of this is never going back to the office. That says a lot for IT departments. I think that says a lot more for security and compliance and investigations and all the world that you live in. Because listen, when I think I said this before, but when I had my NK cert, okay, I had my dongle in hand, my right blocker, and if somebody did something bad and they had to go look at them and look at their machine, I would go walk up to it, pull it out of, pull the hard drive out. Yes. Oh, wow. Look at that. Yeah, there you go. Ours was red at the time, I think. But like now, right? I'm not exactly going to deploy somebody to their home office or to their home, mainly because that's a terrible idea. That's also horribly inefficient. But the work still has to get done. Like we can't just simply ignore all the due diligence that still has to happen as part of just about any type of, it doesn't have to be a security incident. It can be legal and compliance due diligence, right? It can be, things for data discovery, lawsuits and other types of legal affairs. There's so many things that need to trigger these events that were really easy when we were all in the same spot. Got a little bit more complex as we had multiple offices, and it's a head scratcher when everybody's remote.
Yeah, that it sure is, and that's something that our customers are struggling with. The first reaction was, what do we have in place today that we can move and it still work? The other byproduct of pandemic is it's not like there's increased budgets to gain new technology to manage work from home and solve the problem with money. It's first and foremost looking at your existing vendors and figuring out what can be used in a new way. Folks are rethinking the use of technology. They're rethinking how they can, even in that phase between fully moving to the cloud and still being on-prem, how can we set things up in the DMZ as an example to gain access to some of these endpoints over VPN? And the traditional ways where, we could kind of overlook the 10% of the time we had road warriors or somebody working from home that week to look, it's real. We need to change processes and not stick our head in the sands anymore.
Well, and there are, there's very definite processes that don't lend themselves easily to remote employees, particularly that are not on high speed. Although, to be fair, you can get gig cable internet to just about every home in the country now. I'd say that within reach of a city, and not necessarily true everywhere. But things like doing a hard drive acquisition. If it's 100 megs, it's a gig, sure. But my 5 terabyte drive, that's going to take a minute.
Well, that's it too. The days of full disk imaging are kind of come and gone, as well as new technology. Not just our own at Encase, but others have better ways of targeting information, better ways of only touching or pulling back what you need, and some of those same capabilities to limit the scope of what you're looking at are just as important for things like GDPR in an on-prem world. So these are things that we're already starting to think about here at OpenText Encase, and we'll hear a lot more over the next 4 weeks at Enfuse, how we're looking to better take advantage of the cloud, modern architectures, scale and processing capabilities through hyperscalers to really meet the need of not just work from home and remote access, but look, these cases are getting bigger, they're getting more complex. The worlds of the digital investigator skills are required far more broadly speaking than just beyond the criminal world or even the HR investigation world, as we look at the proliferation of communications online, the ability to be anonymous, and the need to separate facts from the truth. And that's really what this is all about, looking at digital investigations, e-discovery, incident response, detection. This is all about figuring out what's real, what's not, what are the facts of the matter so that we can appropriately respond, no matter whether it be an argument in court or an HR action or isolating parts of the network.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure we brought this up last year because I remember this as part of a conversation, but there is this melting together of some. It's kind of interesting that open text pulled in Encase's product line, right? That entire investigate digital forensics, right? And as an investigation tool. And the reason I say that is you just mentioned, the explosion of data, like the fact that there's more of it than there ever was before. And it's not just, it used to be, you're right, like, hey, inappropriate images on somebody's laptop, or did they steal a file as on their last day from work? Like that stuff is easy. And then we went into what did the attacker do? Where did they land? What did they take? What kind of damage could they have done? But these cases are getting more complex. The reasons for forensics are getting more complex. And you can't just take the entire hard drive right now, or I guess it's, whatever the storage mechanism is. I guess I can't say hard drive anymore because it's not, I guess does not that construct doesn't really exist as much as it used to. But wow, it's dating me a little bit, huh? But you've got this.
It exists. It's just somebody else's hard drive now.
Right. It's like somebody else's computer too. But look, I've got terabytes of disk space, of volatile, non-volatile memory. I've got SSD. I've got spinning platters. I've got cloud. I've got Dropbox. I've got OneDrive. 74 other variants of all of those. And suddenly somebody says, I think there's a lawsuit filed and says, listen, we need to know all the places this data lives. And you're like, all there, over there, everywhere, right? How do we even begin to amass the volume of knowledge to the precision where you can say it lives here, it's traveled here, and I can gather it relatively quickly, or I can point to it at least. That without a massively distributed architecture for that, without the ability to do like super fast query across vast amount of data types, right? Because you've got documents, Microsoft documents, open source files, text files, PostScript, GIFs, zip, like file formats galore. How do you even begin to parse through all that in a meaningful amount of time? Because I just imagine a query running for hours and hours and hours every time you ask a question. That's what Encase used to be like. Like, hey, I need to look for everything in this drive that looks kind of with this, matching this regex, and then you'd walk away, go get lunch, and come back, and yeah, there it is. Like it found a couple. Like it can't work that way today.
No, and it doesn't work that way today. One of the things we've been focusing on over the past year or so is distributing out, for example, the processing needed to answer those questions out to the endpoints where that data is resident, as well as that more targeted approach to finding information. So through, at least on the Encase side, one of the benefits is a single query to hit all of these different locations using something like an Active Directory or other directory services as that pivot point to identify the locations, and then hit those all in parallel with that same query, bringing that responsive information back. But something else you said really hit on the beginning of our conversation. What does this business mean to a company like OpenText? It's been 3 years. I remember upon the acquisition scratching my own head in terms of how the fit was going to manifest itself. And I've had a lot of opportunities to speak to the traditional OpenText customers over the past couple of years, and by that I mean information managers, records managers, folks that are using those types of technologies. And funnily, on the topic of convergence, more and more these folks that are tasked with managing the information assets of a business are being tasked with the security of those information assets. Now, funnily, on the information security side, we know there's been limited focus into things like SharePoint and SharePoint security, let alone Documentum and Content Suite and some of these other commercial information management technology. So, the worlds of information management and security are becoming one and the same. You can't manage information without securing information, and that's the view that OpenText has around this space. And it's the same with the legal space as well. You can't manage information effectively if you can't manage the legal risks that occur or the potential of legal risks around that activity, whether it be data loss or fraud or abuse of some other means. So, we're seeing security becoming data security, evolving as part of information governance over time, and that's just one area of convergence we're seeing, which in some ways sounds a little complicated, but in other ways it's the realization that cybersecurity is no different in thinking of any other type of security that we've had to apply ourselves to in the past. In week 3, we're having Tara Wheeler, who's a cyber policy expert, join us as a speaker. And one of the areas she's going to touch on is the convergence of physical and cyber security. Again, thinking of these things as one and the same ways you think about physical vulnerabilities. Yeah. So too translates into thinking about your threat models and vulnerabilities in the digital world. And those two things are also important from the perspective of, we know in the cyber world, just because I can say Raf's machine was responsible for sending a harassing email, while that could be true, it's not always true. I got to prove that you were sitting at that keyboard just as much as I have to prove that it was your machine that transmitted that information, meaning now digital video is going to become important. Access control, badge control data is important in order for me to make that assertion and prove it.
Yeah, well, so correlating so much of this information together, and I think that's where. So right after the announcement was made, now coming up on 3 years ago, I'm with you, man. I was like, okay, this is a weird acquisition, and I think it took me about 15 seconds to walk in. I think it was at Caesars and walk around and went, nope, never mind, I get it. It was because what is forensics really all about? Access to the data, right? And having information and data and being able to access it, model it, slice and dice, understand it. That's kind of, not kind of, that was OpenText's bread and butter. That's what the company did.
We do,
right?
Yeah.
Right, and still do. And now you're tacking on and integrating into the platform this idea of security, right? So, but what does security mean, right? It's not just securing the data, but it's leveraging that data to perform security functions. E-discovery, that's a big legal thing, right? Do forensics to go be able to dig up what happened. And there's so many implications for the I guess the richness of outcome that you can have based on the bringing together of these companies. I tell you, I've always been a fan of platforms. So I think I've said this to you. Actually, when Patrick was still there, him and I had this conversation. I have to remind him of that. But I said, listen, something to the effect of, I absolutely love platforms, and I think you guys have the potential to build a great one. So, but you just really got to tack on like the rest of security. And well, I guess somebody had that already in the plan because you did it. And there's
hey, we're doing
and still
just to be clear, that wasn't the end. Where Encase was the beginning, Weber was a step in the journey.
Yeah, I totally. And then security really isn't about just protecting; it's about recovering as well, which took you to the next acquisition you guys made. And so, I totally get the acquisition strategy. It makes complete sense to me. And having the ability to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. That's literally the 5 parts of NIST, right? The CSF.
That's right.
And as a company, you don't have to provide firewalls. You don't have to do all the other ethereal stuff that comes with security. But having that core and being able to follow along all 5 of those key areas of the NIST CSF, I think makes you extremely valuable, because my head is always at this: can I make it less complex? Can I make it cheaper? And then can I make it more effective? Well, that's what platforms sort of do, right? You take out some of that cost because you're buying it from a single source, obviously better price that way, blah blah blah. You guys have market efficiencies now. You have one marketing department, sales efficiencies, development efficiencies. God only knows. And then you've got the entire part of um, reducing complexity. Although that's the one place where I think that a lot of these like acquisition type glue-togethers struggle, Mantic, um, right?
Mhm.
Because you can
And
end
we
up
had
like,
ours in the first year. That's for sure.
yeah, well, but if you can get that, and you don't even have to nail it perfectly, you just have to not screw it up and completely. Integrations are nice, but they have to be native and they have to be like in the product development life cycle. I remember
Mhm.
complaining about another security company that's soon to be, or maybe still is gone, or is almost gone. I don't know, but they had one of the greatest platforms I think I've heard, and this was like 5, 6 years ago. And I was like, I am so excited about this. I can't wait to see it all function. I'm like, okay, when does this all release? Like, well, this piece over here comes out this year, and the next one comes out to Q1 of next year. And then I'm like, wait a second, time out. You're gonna release this piecemeal. They're not the release cycles are not in sync. This is gonna fail. And well, we saw how that went. But that's all to say that I'm kind of excited about the continued evolution. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you guys are kind of what your main themes are, what your big things are this year, because I'd like to. I think I'm going to participate along where I can.
Yeah, be happy to. What the biggest theme I think this year will be, the beginning of our journey to the cloud and SaaS based type offerings across investigative, legal,
Okay.
security, incident response markets. Without giving away too much, we've started on that journey. We'll be hearing a lot more about that over the course of Enfuse. But going back to some of my earlier comments, we have reached a point where companies are moving in this direction. There was hesitancy given the kind of data that security and e-discovery and forensic products deal with to move that wholesale to the cloud. But there's little choice now. Not just the work from home, but the size of cases, the hardware requirements for multi-terabyte indexing, analytics, whatever have you.
Yeah.
Depending on the nature of the case, is calling for that move, and we're starting that journey with our customers, and we'll hear about that next week. Also, hear a little bit about some of the work we've recently done with MITRE as we bring our endpoint security solution to a full stack EDR detection and response
That's
capability.
exciting.
It is. Our customers know and are more familiar with us for a focus on incident response over 15 years, as long as I've been with the company, lagging behind a little on detection, but kind of back to the engineering and scale efficiencies we've gotten here at OpenText. We've been able to take on some work that we've aspired to take on as a small 300-person company years back and can do in reality now.
That's kind of awesome, though. That's going to bring it completely full circle, right? Close that loop because now you've got the identify section, right? Discovery and data identification and all the data handling stuff.
Well, and in the future, tying that too, and we'll be talking next week or over the next weeks a little bit more about how we're working better with the content side of the house here at OpenText, extending security controls into Documentum, Content Suite, and even things like SharePoint and Box through the same architecture we've developed for that. And one of the benefits, or another benefit OpenText brings as a security company, we know information. We know how folks use information. We know the challenges of information management. That is to say, the human aspects that can cause risks and issues related to usage. Simple example, check-in, check-out policies that information management teams have to enforce and struggle to enforce for lack of some behavioral type controls within those information management platforms, which are more, if I think about SharePoint security or Documentum native security, that's more about access control, not about
Yeah.
what individuals are doing with the information and is that appropriate for the business usage that data is normally associated with, as an example.
Well, listen, if you can make sense of SharePoint for people, you've already won me. Like, help. I
didn't say make sense of SharePoint.
Listen, I think we all start with the world's best intentions, where we're like, okay, we're going to file everything away. We're going to all put it in its own place. Everybody's going to have their own workplaces, and good stuff will, production stuff will be stored here. Drafts will be stored here. 6 months later, you're like, I have 27 folders. None of them match.
Yep.
Oh gosh, I can't tell you how useful that kind of stuff is. But like I said, you guys kind of completed that circle. So you've got the identify, you've got the protect with the kind of EDR coming out. It'll do what it does, right? Then detect and respond, some additional EDR functions, and then adding in the the forensics capabilities that you guys are super known for, right? Everybody knows you for. And then that last bit of recover. I think that's going to be the piece that's good that would be interesting to see the evolution of as a part of your company, as opposed to like what it was by itself.
It's funny you touch on that. We mentioned kind of the WebRoot parts of that particular acquisition, but another technology that came through the WebRoot acquisition was Carbonite backup technology.
Right.
And this is something that we OpenText are not looking at Carbonite through an IT lens. We're looking at it through an InfoSec lens as part of a backup and recovery capability, where you'll hear some of our new friends from Carbonite talking over the coming weeks around how this technology can deploy to help with some ransomware type use cases, right? So if you back your data up and have the means to reimage boxes based on those backups, well, you've mitigated some of the risk related to ransomware. A little different than stopping it entirely, but we don't seem to be able to do that today. So first, let's focus on making sure you've got a good backup and recovery strategy before moving to that next step.
Listen, I've proven to myself that I had a great backup strategy. It's the recovery part that I never tested, and I say that it sounds funny, but it's true. I think a lot of us have gone through that. We're like, well, we're backing it up; it should be fine. And you go to restore, you're like, oh, I forgot that one key thing.
Right.
Yeah, about that. And none of this, like 2 years of backup, is worthwhile. So if you can simplify and process integrate the idea of restoring backed up data, and then keep it away from, because the other way to quote back up is to put it on a separate drive and keep it always connected. Well, if you get encrypted on ransomware on your machine, well, they reach out to network drives and connected devices and everything else on the network. So that's not going to help you any.
My shadow copies are all
infected. Right. It jacks up everything. And so these guys, look, criminals are smart. That's kind of their trade. They have to be. But this continued arms race is going to be required. And I think I really do appreciate the fact that you're kind of hitting it from all sides, right? You're not just banking on an EDR. You're not just living on the laurels of your forensics. You're not just looking at the discovery part. You're also kind of going into and looking at it, say, if all those other things fail, because at some point they might, can I still get my data back from, maybe it might be a day old, but you know what's better than no data.
That's right. And we'll hear a little bit more about how Carbonite helps with that next week. And as we look at the stack that OpenText is bringing together, it really is a data security focused. It's not firewalls and IDS and other types of barriers. More, we need to follow the data. We need to understand the data risks, and we need appropriate controls to manage whatever those identified risks are, which is a very different approach than that traditional let's put walls up and monitor the walls
look,
was appropriate maybe for the on-prem only world.
Well, look, the thing that I can tell you for certain after 22 some odd years in our industry and what it has evolved into is that without understanding and knowing, at least from a business process perspective, where the data and information that your organization cares about lives and where it's processed, the rest of security may as well not matter. Because what have we done? We've done, somebody taught me the peanut butter analogy, right? We just kind of spread it evenly across the bread. We're like, yeah, it looks good enough. And then you realize that you're protecting systems that process payroll in the exact same way that you process something that you could literally throw away and nobody would care about. And I think the reason for that, though, is that nobody ever figured out segmentation, right? Because once you log into a network, you have access to everything. And now that we're talking about zero trust as an industry, we're talking about micro segmentation and identity-based segmentation and all the things that go with it. Suddenly, we're back to the data. And I feel like it's 1995 again, where I'm like, listen, it's right there. I know where it is. Ergo, I know what to do to protect it. And it's not like out there somewhere, right? So that's actually really cool. And that data-centric approach, I don't know, man. You guys may win it because the data-centric approach, while it's not the silver bullet necessarily, I think it is of all the possible, right, of all the host-based and network-based, I think the data-based approach, knowing where that information is, what it's classified as, who uses it, what they do to it, right? Where does it matter? Why does it matter? I think that from a business perspective, that's probably the most important approach you can take.
Well, and you hit it on the head. There's never going to be a silver bullet, but there is going to be better informed decision making, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we aim to provide better informed decision making, right? Based on an understanding of what data you need, where it is, why it's important, and what risks you should be thinking about related to that information. And part of it too is, as you mentioned, the peanut butter security approach. It's funny, I've said this as well. You have to know your infrastructure. You have to understand your own network, your own threat models. Don't just listen to the vendors or the reports. What's good for a bank is not going to be good for a manufacturing company from a security perspective. Even two manufacturing companies are going to have different mitigation efforts in place, meaning that their risks are going to be different based on wherever those gaps are. And, I can't answer that. You can't answer that. The IT security teams should be able to answer that.
Let me end this with a question for you, because this is something that there's been a lot of on this podcast and a couple other things I've done lately. This has been the focal point. Is whatever function we're talking about here, the data protection, cybersecurity, whatever it chooses to be called, it amalgamates into, does this stay as a security function? And I'm asking this for a specific reason, because security used to have a network component, an application component, a systems component, a user component, an identity component. Like, they managed all that. And as the need for security professionals exploded and grew, some of the smart people in the industry that I've observed have long said this is an unsustainable model. Security needs to be in the functions and then have a central governance function that is not the massive team that we have today, right? So if that is the case, what does that mean for what you guys do and how and who you sell to, who uses the products, like where it lives, where it's managed? What does that do for you?
Yeah, I think that there's two elements to this. One, there's still a lot of opportunity to abstract away heavy lifting that's involved with some of these disciplines. And we've even over the past 10 years, things have changed a lot. If you go back 10 years, people were doing file carving in hex, deep dive investigations, which, vendors have abstracted away some of that into more of a triage first approach as an example. And it's going to get easier still as the market, as software providers get a better understanding of how to apply things like machine learning, which frankly hasn't been done very well to date. But there's still promise there with the proper application. This is getting ahead of problems. If I know, 10 years of activity across my global network, I should have some information in there that will help me determine where in the future attackers would target, where in the future I should apply my security investments as an example. And we, the vendors, need to make it easier for folks to do their jobs. It shouldn't require a PhD in cybersecurity to run tier one triage operations for security operations center as an example. Through contextualization, through better user experience, we can help bubble up things that are important. We can abstract away some of the detection, threat hunting, heavy lifting. This is a huge issue. Threat hunting, everybody wants to do it. Nobody has the time or the resources unless you're, name your top 3 banks that have the staff and funding to do this. So, technology's got to come into play. It's an area we're focused, not only through making technology easier to consume through the cloud, but also automating some of that heavy lifting, but as well at the end of the day, for some of the more meaningful compromises, breaches, whatever have you, eyes are going to be needed at the end of the day. If today it's 100 eyes, we'd love to get to a point where it's only 2 eyes at the end of the day that needs to determine, hey, is this a real system file or is this an injected system file, as a simple example of something where, if you automatically kill it, you could take down the network. You'll never be able to get people entirely out of the process. But again, you can make sure that those folks are focusing on where their education and expertise matters the most.
Sure.
Which isn't creating search queries.
No, definitely. And it isn't pouring through terabytes of information one line at a time, right?
No, absolutely.
And so I think that's a lot of that. That's what automation promises us, especially with things like machine learning and the ability to do fuzzy searches and like matching and all those other cool terms. But so I think this is an interesting place to end it, on this note of convergence, where a lot of these tasks that used to be independent silos run by different teams that barely talk to each other except to pass in the hall, are starting to collapse into more conglomerate functions, maybe even under one leadership eventually, because they're kind of managing, understanding the data, protecting the data, responding to threats to the data, and then disaster recovering the data should that be required.
You make me think about what's going on in DevSecOps right now. Just as an example of convergence trying to make it easier to build secure applications. Just so security should be embedded in information management, should be embedded in the business, and not I don't want to say an afterthought, but this thing hanging off on the side, making my computer run slow, or whatever it's perceived as.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm out of coffee, and this has been a great conversation. I don't want to run too long, but I'm looking forward to the next couple, because we got a couple more to record, and preview it for me. What are people going to be listening to if they keep listening to us? What are our big themes?
Big themes are going to be convergence and the cloud. We're going to hear a lot about the convergence, as I've mentioned, information management and security. We're going to hear about the convergence on our day 1 keynote with Attorney General Nadja West, some learnings we can take from the world of medicine to the world of triage and scope assessment, incident response. And again, we'll hear a little bit about the convergence of physical and cybersecurity on week 3 with our special guest, Tara Wheeler. So
I can't
hope you
wait
all
for
in
that
the
one.
audience join us. It's going to be a great program this year, and we think you'll enjoy it.
All right, we'll stick a link on the video, but how do people get signed up if they're like, holy cow, I need to be a part of this? How do I do that?
Let's go to opentext.com/Enfuse and register today. You can register all the way up until week 4 if you like. We're not closing it down. It's complimentary for you. And if you are a customer, we'll be holding hands-on labs where you can get your continuing education credits for your NK certified examiner certification maintenance.
Oh man, I wish I would have kept up with that. Although I suspect it's a little too late for me. I don't think my right blocker, my IDE right blocker will work anymore.
and maybe just finally, for those folks that are on the fence about joining the YouTube version of this episode, little Easter egg here on my lapel for those
that's
folks
brilliant.
to see what day I'm commemorating.
Don't tell them what it is though. They're gonna have to see that one. That's a good one. That's a good one. That's a good one. Yep. You're gonna want to watch the video, kids. Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, folks, thanks for listening. Anthony Di Bello from OpenText from Enfuse 2020 about to kick off. We're going to make this thing happen. We'll get it published, and I will catch you guys another time, another place. on a couple more editions of the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. We'll talk to you later. Ciao.